Denji has always been a character driven by the most chaotic mix of desperation, hormones, and a very real need to feel human. But Chainsaw Man Chapter 229, it does something wild in that it takes all those ridiculous motivations and it reframes it into something that is tragic and noble, and honestly, it's a lot deeper than it had any right to be, especially when you understand the cultural significance behind what you saw with Yoru's scene, as well as what this means for Denji's character. Because while the world is falling apart around them, Fujimoto gives us a chapter that isn't about spectacle, even though Denji asking Yoru, are we still gonna do it, is the thing everyone's gonna focus on. Instead, this chapter is about guilt and survival, and two broken beings who are trying to understand emotions that they were never truly meant to understand. This chapter, it is a turning point. This isn't another weird, uncomfortable, darkly funny Chainsaw Man moment. This is a chapter where Denji and Yoru and Mitaka, they stop orbiting around chaos briefly and they start becoming fully realized characters inside of the chaos itself. And if Fujimoto sticks the landing here, Chapter 229 may end up being remembered as a moment where all three of these characters' stories ends up leveling up completely. So as per usual, we'll do a brief recap of the chapter, and then boy oh boy do we got a lot to talk about. Again, there's some huge cultural stuff that is in this that if you're not a Japanese person or you don't know anything about Japanese culture, you completely missed it. So this chapter opens up with Yoru, and she's lying on the ground and she's severely injured and bleeding. Despite her condition, she lets out a weak laugh as she looks up and she notices two birds that are flying overhead. Mitaka, who is still conscious within their shared body, is confused and stunned by what Yoru has just done, specifically her earlier decision to spare the dove. Mitaka questions Yoru, asking why she even bothered leaving it alive when she could have simply have just taken complete control of the body and the mind that they share. As Mitaka struggles to understand her reasoning, Denji is shown crawling slowly towards them, clearly exhausted and injured, but still desperately trying to reach their location. Yoru responds to Mitaka by explaining that at the very beginning, she took over the bird out of sheer necessity in order to survive. Even though it was only a bird, she could still feel the creature's emotions, especially its guilt for catching and eating worms in order to stay alive. Yoru reflects on this experience, emphasizing that even as an act of survival, this creature carried a sense of guilt and it bothered her. She continues by explaining that embracing and bearing guilt allows her to create stronger weapons. The better she understands it, the stronger the weapon. Yoru admits that she attempted to understand Mitaka's guilt the same way, but she ultimately failed to grasp it. And this is because Yoru at her heart is not a human being. And human beings are extremely complex characters. We'll touch on that in a moment. So Mitaka is left utterly speechless by this admission. Yoru then concludes that some of the things that Mitaka herself considered to be sins, they are insignificant from a devil's perspective. Again, human beings are complicated, and Yoru as a devil can't truly comprehend human beings. Just as she finishes saying this, and it looks like we're going to have a real heart-to-heart moment with Mitaka and with Yoru, Denji finally manages to crawl close enough to reach them. Despite being in terrible condition, Denji tears open his remaining arm and he offers his blood to Yoru so that she can regenerate. After giving the blood, he collapses from exhaustion. Yoru, who is now fully recovered due to the blood, she's absolutely bewildered by Denji's decision. She questions him, demanding to know why he would help her when there's a real possibility she could just kill him afterwards. And she just asks him flat out, do you want to die? Do you want me to kill you? Denji explains that the sudden decision is because he remembered the promise from earlier that they would have sex after he succeeded in eating a dangerous devil. His answer is blunt, it's straightforward. It's something that you probably focused on, but there's a deeper meaning to it. And basically, in response, Yoru, she busts out in laughter afterwards. As this exchange happens, the world around them continues to descend further into chaos, underscoring that tension between the personal moments shared by the characters and the larger catastrophe unfolding in the background, because it does look like hell is still there. And the chapter ends on that note, with Yoru laughing and Denji collapse after helping her regenerate, with the surrounding situation continuing to worsen. So let's go further here, because good God, there's a lot to break down. So chapter 229, beneath the surface, is quietly deceptive. On the surface, it looks like your typical absurd Fujimoto contrast. A girl's bleeding out while talking about guilt. You get all this deep, dark stuff. The apocalypse, it is escalating in the background, and Denji is making what sounds like the dumbest possible justification for saving someone. Basically, hey, I'm trying to lose my virginity. But underneath the surface, this chapter is doing something far more important, if you understand what Fujimoto's doing. So it's reframing both Denji and Yoru, not as punchlines, not as archetypes, but as two deeply damaged characters who are learning in very different ways what it means to carry guilt and what it means to choose to live. And caught in the middle of both of them is Mitaka. Yoru is the brat. She was never truly acting like a devil when you look at everything that happened in part 2 with this new information. She was acting like something that did not understand what it meant to be human, despite sharing the body with a human. Yoru's explanation about the bird, it is the key to everything. It felt guilty for an act of necessary survival. That line dismantles Mitaka's entire worldview. Mitaka has always treated survival, especially survival that hurts someone else, as a moral failure. That is why she felt so guilty. Her entire character is built around believing she is inherently wrong for continuing to live when others didn't. Yoru, ironically, is the one who corrects her. From a devil's perspective, Mitaka's so-called sins, they're meaningless. Necessary violence, necessary survival, necessary selfishness. These aren't moral failings. Instead, they're existence. And here's the twist. Yoru knows this because she experienced this guilt herself. Not as the war devil, not as Mitaka's possessor, because she's in control of her body, but instead as a bird. And this should be the moment that changes how you view everything in this chapter, as well as everything you've seen Yoru do while controlling Mitaka's body. Yoru's humanity was beginning to start being planted in the sense that she was being humanized well before she met Mitaka. So the bird imagery is a reference to a very popular Japanese children's story, The Nighthawk Star. So in that story, the Nighthawk Star is mocked for being ugly, just like Yoru's bird in the beginning of part 2 was inherently ugly. And this bird was so consumed with guilt over eating insects in order to survive that it starved itself and it flew off into the sky. Ultimately, it became a star in the night. It is a creature punished by existence itself, a being that is ashamed simply for living. Just as when Yoru made that deal with Mitaka, Mitaka was going through her own guilt. That right there is Yoru. She literally began part 2 inhabiting the body of a bird, feeling its guilt, feeling its helpless survival instinct. The humanization of Yoru, it did not start with Mitaka. It started the moment that she lived as something weak. This recontextualizes her entire part 2 personality. If you go back and reread part 2, strictly with this information in mind, so much more makes sense. Her bratty outbursts, her awkward laughter, her inability to process emotions properly. All those times she acted out of pocket, now it makes sense. Even the moments where she's laughing, like when Denji is suggesting to Mitaka they can be parent killers together. That wasn't a insane devil laughing. That wasn't devil cruelty. Those were nervous, alien-like reactions because those are feelings she didn't know how to process. Sometimes when people are feeling different emotions that they can't comprehend, laughter is just a natural defense mechanism. Yoru wasn't mocking humanity here. She was experiencing it. She didn't spare Mitaka because she needed a host. She spared Mitaka because she understood her. When Yoru tells Mitaka that her sins are nothing, it's not manipulation. Instead, it is validation. Both Mitaka and Denji, they grew up believing that their survival, it came at someone else's expense. Both of them killed their parents. Both internalized guilt for circumstances completely outside of their control. Yoru, the war devil, the embodiment of conflict, is the one who says, "You didn't do anything wrong." This comes right after Yoru saved a bird of peace. That bird of peace being the dove. War and peace go hand in hand. Denji's action is not regression either. Instead, while it is classic Denji, it is also compassion in disguise. And if you understand Denji's character, and you picked up on the nuances from part 1, and you didn't fall victim to all the memes of people that clip Denji out of context, this moment should really hit for you. So at first glance, Denji saving Yoru because she promised sex. It looks like the ultimate Denji never grows gag. It looks like Fujimoto's doing the same old Denji suffers and then Denji gets over suffering, Denji gets me, and then Denji suffers again. If you thought that, I understand why. I understand why you would think that, but I would suggest rereading the chapter after watching this review. Because this is something that was structured very intentionally and almost identical to what happened with his relationship with Power. When Denji saved Power after her betrayal, he also claimed it was because of a promise. On the surface, Denji framed it as a selfish motivation, but the truth was empathy. He understood her pain in that moment. He understood what it was that she was trying to gain when it came to getting Miaoi. He understood that desperation. Denji does not express compassion through speeches. You can blame that on Denji's upbringing. Instead, Denji expresses a lot of his compassion through dumb-ass justifications. And that's what's happening here. He says, "You promised that we would have sex." And while you could argue that's definitely on his mind, we also know that Denji is capable of viewing women not as sex objects. He covered up Reze after the Bomb Devil arc. When she was in the nude, he covered her up. When Mitaka was asleep, he covered her up. When he was bathing with Power, he didn't have sexual thoughts, the same when they were in the bed together. When you look at what just happened here, what took place? Yoru was struggling with guilt. She was trying to understand Mitaka. Denji in this moment saw somebody that had proof that she could feel. That right there, you could argue, is enough for Denji's character. Denji isn't the type of character who says you deserve to live. He says something stupid and he saves you anyway. His goal ultimately is to get Mitaka her body back. That cannot happen if Yoru does not give it back to her willingly. The crude logic, it is a shield. Underneath that, it's the same emotional instinct that Denji's always had. That is why anyone who just boils Denji down to just being a gooner doesn't truly understand the character. When Yoru laughs, it's that brilliance in that it's the devil's inability to understand human contradiction. Yoru's laughter at the end of the chapter, it wasn't mockery, it was confusion. Devils operate on clean logic, survival, dominance, fear. Fear makes them stronger. Devils are supposed to hate humans. Those are basic human emotions, ironically, for devils. Humans, on the other hand, they don't necessarily feel that way. Think about it. We help people for irrational reasons. Humans disguise kindness as selfishness at times. Humans act emotionally even when emotions don't make sense. Denji embodies that contradiction perfectly. And Yoru, who has slowly become more human since her time as the bird, she can recognize that feeling, but she doesn't truly understand what it is. And that is why she laughs. This chapter is not about chaos. It's about two characters who are choosing to feel anyway. Yoru tried to ignore guilt and move forward like a devil. Denji tries to ignore emotion and pretend that he is shallow. Mitaka is finally starting to understand she shouldn't feel guilty, yet all of them are failing to different degrees. All of them are getting involved. All of them are connecting. All of them still carry guilt and they live anyway. That's the real transformation that is happening here. They're not regressing. They're not being used for comedic relief per se. There's something in between the lines being told here. They are converging forward toward the same emotional space. And it is consistent with what Fujimoto's done with his other works, writing sub-stories in a very subtle way. And that is what elevates chapter 229 from being absolutely bizarre to being genuinely powerful. Obviously, if you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing, clicking on the left to check out more videos from the Chainsman playlist, or click on the right to check out that Oshinoko video essay that I dropped a few days ago.